Okay, so I'm Carlota Loran. I will be organizing the debate. And here we have Candela Sousa, who will be judging, and Johnny, who's also a judge. So thank you for joining us. And we're starting. There's no one missing, right?
Yes, we have a participant who is coming. Can we wait for him?
Okay, we can wait for a minute.
Thanks.
Could we just clarify the rules a little bit?
Yes,
not entirely clear.
I'll start doing that.
So you're going to do that in a minute?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Here it is. I think everyone's seen now. So, first of all, I'd like to remind you about the question who you've all been sent. So the question is, in the current pandemic situation, should the economy be prioritized over health? These are the two envelopes that I'll be using to draw the position that each team will take. So side proposition or affirmative is in favor of prioritizing the economy, and side opposition or negative is against prioritizing the economy. So I'd like to ask the captain from each team to unmute themselves, and please let me know if both captains want to choose, then we will draw it on heads or tails. If anybody wants to let the other team choose, then that team will immediately pick an envelope. So, captains from each team, please.
Sorry, they decide themselves.
No, they say, do you want to?
Excuse me? Could you repeat, please?
For us, it's the same as you wish if you want to choose.
So does St. John's School want to choose an envelope?
So choose A or B. You just choose A or B.
A or B, which one?
B.
Okay. So St. John's School will be defending side opposition. Los Valles will be defending side proposition. Side proposition is in favor of prioritizing the economy, and side opposition in favor of prioritizing health. Now, I'll be reminding you of the predetermined times for each intervention. So side proposition will always start, and the structure is the following. So first off, the opening affirmative presentation, which is 4 minutes. For side proposition, opening affirmative negative presentation, which is 4 minutes for side opposition. Then affirmative second speech for 3 minutes, side proposition. Negative second speech, 3 minutes for side opposition. Then affirmative cross-examination, 1 minute and 30 seconds, 3 turns of intervention, alternating between side opposition and side proposition. And finally, affirmative rebuttal statement, 3 minutes, side proposition, negative rebuttal statement, 3 minutes, side opposition. Each team is allowed to make questions. Now, there is an error in the document we sent you. The questions can only be made during the second speech for each team, okay? So the speaker from each team is bound to accept at least one question, unless it is made in the last minute, in which case they may refuse to answer it if they consider it best. To ask questions, the opposite team may interrupt the other team. However, normally if we were in person, we would just raise our hands, the team would answer. But now I want to ask you to raise your hand over Zoom, and I will interrupt the speaker, who will accept the question either in that moment or in a few minutes, and the speaker has to answer the question during their speech. So remember, only during the argument, the second speech for each team. And it is recommended that the questions are kept as short as possible, as the speakers only have 3 minutes for their speech, and we don't want to take too much time with them. So are there any doubts about this?
Yeah, could I ask a question, please?
Sure.
We've prepared it so that the opening speaker is going to speak for 4 minutes and for another 3 minutes. The same person is going to do that. And then in the final statement, we have a different person to sum up. Would that be acceptable?
That is acceptable. Usually what we do is one speaker does each part. So opening statement, second speech, cross-examination, and final statement are usually prepared by one speaker each. However, it is accepted for the same person to do the same speech. So that's accepted. It may be specified in the rules for the teams that do make it into the final, but for now it is accepted.
And in the last piece, we have a different person who's giving the final statement.
Yes.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Right.
Next.
So, yeah, can we, the students are asking when they can ask questions. So what point?
Okay, so for questions I will warn you before. So it's in the second speech for each team. They have to raise their hands and I will give them a chance to speak. Okay, during that person's speech. So the speech is 3 minutes. During the opposite team's speech, they can raise their hands. I will let them ask the question and the other speaker will answer. And the same thing during the second speech, they will be asked questions by the opposite team. So is it clearer, or do you want me to explain that again?
So that will be in the cross-examination stage.
No, in the affirmative second speech and negative second speech, which are 3 minutes each.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so once the debate begins, you will not be able to see us. You will be able to see the time as I switch the camera. So that's what you'll see. All right, I'll switch for a moment. And I will give warnings for not sticking to the established time. And with 2 warnings, there is an extra point reduction. But keep in mind there's a 10-second margin for time adjusting. So if a speech is 4 minutes, you may do 3 minutes and 50 seconds or 4 minutes and 10 seconds. Over that time or under that time, I will give you a warning, and the punctuation, or there will be a penalization for that. So no technology is allowed. Camera should be on at all times. I don't know, Pablo Montenegro, and excuse me if I mispronounced, Tula Davila, the cameras need to be on. If not, I am obliged to thank you. Thanks, that's great. Especially for the people who will be speaking. So thank you for meeting us this evening or this morning for you. Now, I see that Los Valles is under lockdown right now, or are you? Yes. So you will have around 2 minutes to prepare between each speech, to gather up all your evidence, and since you cannot prepare it together, you will have that margin of time to prepare, gather up your evidence, and start your speech.
Sorry.
Yeah.
During that time, should we organize our information speaking aloud, or how are we supposed to communicate with each other to organize our evidence?
If you want to communicate between your own team, I'm sorry, no technology is allowed, but you will be able to, if you need to, use the chat on Zoom. If you need to, that's your choice, but no phones are allowed.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Just a moment. Okay, so I can just been told that the penalization for not sticking to the time, having 2 warnings is 5 points out of the total score. So keep that in mind. It's important for each speech. So are you ready? Who's the first speaker? We are starting with opening affirmative presentation, 4 minutes for side proposition. Who will be starting?
Julia.
Yes.
No.
Excuse me, are you ready? Who's the speaker for opening affirmative presentation for side proposition?
Our speaker is Adriano Reis.
Adriana Rees. Yes.
Okay, get a clarification because we are economics should be prioritized over health. If you may confirm.
Yes, economics over health for side proposition, health over economics for side opposition, okay? I'm going to switch my camera, and whenever you're ready, just give us a sign and we will set the timing, okay?
Okay, you may start the timer. Well, greetings everyone. Today we're going to present why the economy should be prioritized over health. And nobody can deny that the world revolves around the economy, and without it, chaos would appear and progress will stop. And there are no solutions, only trade-offs. Thomas Sowell. People need to meet their most basic necessities, and that's why economic measures should be prioritized over health, because it's the core of any productive activity anywhere, anytime. We know this is a sensitive topic, but don't get us wrong. Having empathy and solidarity for many deaths we have faced is essential. But we strongly believe that suffering and pain cannot be the main factor affecting our decisions. We have to use reason and judgment to take the best actions for our future and ensure that all individuals can count with the means to cope with their survival during and after the pandemic. It can be argued that health is important, but it cannot be self-sustaining. It needs a strong foundation over a solid economy to be able to afford adequate health care, to provide us with suitable supplies, equipment, and research that are required, and how governments can face all these expenses if their gross incomes decreases or paralyzes. It may seem like a harsh decision, but it's the best option. It comes at the cost of people getting sick, but with the investment in research, the results are clear. Vaccines have been found, and it's all thanks to favoring the economy over health. It's a fact, proved that by the BBC News and with statistics that if the economy is in favor, everything crumbles. A good example of this is how the pandemic affected places like Brazil, for example, because of the lack of hospitals and medical equipment, and can only be obtained if Brazil had invested more into these types of equipment and services. I can keep going on and on with these cases, but it should be crystal clear by now that favoring the economy is the path to follow. The care of the other diseases that have been postponed or interrupted to some degree during the pandemic, in particular, to the management of chronic and non-communicable diseases such as, cancer, sexually transmitted diseases, maternal and childbirth. For example, cancer research in the UK announced a cut of £45 million in its research budget. The charity has also been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, and which this forced the cancellation of fundraising events. Don't you think that all these millions of unfortunate people have the same rights to a better quality of healthcare system and deserve a chance to a stable life? All this was caused because of the economic recession we are living nowadays. And therefore, we should prioritize the economy to help the people and life of all our people. If we take some time to look into the evidence we have about the statistics of each country's situation, during the pandemic, we may notice a lot of countries like Peru, for example, Chile, that have a very strict, I would say, order of their restrictions when it comes to countermeasures. And yet they have a higher rate of deaths of COVID, with 26,000 in Chile. Well, in places like Sweden, the countermeasures are not so heavily imposed, but they still manage to have a lot less cases and still focus on their economy, so which they may progress. This is also very essential for each country. So with our group, we have agreed upon that economy is the best way to go and the only way to agree upon this. This is a global pandemic, everyone. This is a time to take action and think about our actions and what we can do to make the world better and improve, because there's a need to face it and we need to balance the consequences with whatever we can and see and not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it's time for opening narrative presentation, 4 minutes, side opposition, St. John's. Whenever you're ready, you tell us and we start the timer.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Excuse me, could you speak a little louder? We can't hear very well.
I will. Can you hear me slightly better now?
Yeah, that's much better. Whenever you're ready, just tell us. We'll start.
Okay, you can start. It is health that is real wealth and not pieces of gold and silver. Gandhi. In 1946, the World Health Organization defined health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. The health of a country is absolutely essential for it to function, because without a body politic, both mentally and physically fit, the economy will be rendered entirely useless. Physical health, in a circumstance like this, is crucial. Economic historians have recorded that at least 1/3 of all gross domestic product per capita growth in developed countries can be attributed to an improved quality of health. It cannot just be a coincidence that for a country to develop, they need healthy inhabitants. So to neglect health to favour the economy will not only cause it to collapse completely. Mental health is also often disregarded, but you cannot have a healthy population if they are unhappy. People are much less likely to return to work due to an increased sense of worthlessness and unimportance, which has been pushed onto us by politicians who favour money in their own pocket over humanity. It is selfish to allow people in power to put a price on human life after so many people have lost so much. The World Health Organization reported that almost 1/4 of people have increased feelings of loneliness, leading to 22% of people turning to alcohol for comfort and 46% of people over controlling their food intake to gain a sense of purpose. Suicide rates, though have not risen, have become more prominent, and quite frankly, dead people cannot work and contribute to the economy. Also, the virus is constantly mutating, so healthcare is constantly having to adapt to keep up with it. However, the economy has been around since before 12,000 BC. It is constantly changing, it is constant no matter how often it changes and dips. It is vital that we favour health so that it doesn't spiral into a situation that is impossible to solve. Global healthcare institutes are already struggling to keep up with the amount of mutations forming from COVID, and soon the motivation directed towards healthcare will dwindle because there is no end in sight. On the contrary, the economy can be boosted easily, as seen by in the UK, the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. Health should be prioritised because we are incapable of bringing back the dead, but it is possible to prevent it if health is taken into consideration first. And the side effects from people dying which could potentially affect the economy negatively, can be prevented, like mourning families having to take time off of work to grieve. It is also vital to mention that countries that have dealt with the coronavirus the best have been those in Asia that suffered terribly from the SARS epidemic from 2002 to 2004. Taiwan, for example, only had 1,110 cases and 12 deaths. The population of Taiwan is 23.57 million. To put this into perspective, Ecuador has a population of 17.86 million and has had over 18,000 COVID-related deaths. Audrey Tang, the digital minister of Taiwan, wanted a long-term association of joy and humour rather than anger and outrage, which she managed to positively achieve. Taiwan has been COVID-free for over 253 days, and I think they're a perfect example of why health should be favoured over the economy.
Thank you. Now it's time for affirmative second speech, 3 minutes, side proposition. Let me remind you, this is the time where you can ask questions. So we're starting with Los Valles. 3 minutes, St. John's. If you've got any question during the speech, raise your hand. I will give you the opportunity to ask it. And the speaker from St. John's may accept the question in that moment or in a couple of minutes. And that's all, I think. If there's any doubts about this, please ask now. Okay, so when you're ready, speaker from Los Valles, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So I want to revise some of the few points that you have mentioned in your introduction. First of all, you've talked about the physical, mental, and the well-being of the people in general, and we actually believe that all of that is thanks to an economic stability. If we don't have an economic stability, we cannot give health to people of all around the world. People are experiencing some mental health problem because of this confinement. And there are actually lots and lots of problematics that will come with an economic recession that we are living and that we'll be facing, because it's going to be much worse in doing time. According to experts of the British Medical Journal, suicide rates could increase up to 145% during this pandemic. We have to take into account all the lives lost, and it is essential, the economy, for us to maintain stability. We've talked about it's selfish to put on price on human lives, and actually it is selfish, but it's also selfish to not considering that the economy are the foundation of our society, and that we will face lots of economic problems, not only in the present, but also for future generation if we do not encounter the stability. People are dying. And actually, I want to leave you with an important question. What is the only way to stop this pandemic? Well, according to Dr. Chief of the International Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci, during a CNBC interview, he stated that vaccines are the only way to stop this pandemic. We need vaccines because this is the only way to keep human lives safe and to stop.
Excuse me, that's the question if you want to accept it right now.
I'll finish my statement then.
Okay.
So there are many vaccines, and we need lots of vaccines, and they cost lots of money for governments. Therefore, we need an economic stability if we want to stop this virus. If you want to answer.
If suicide rates are set to increase, surely health should be prioritized.
Could you please repeat the question? I couldn't listen clearly.
If suicide rates are set to increase, surely health should be prioritized.
Yes, but first of all, that's not a question, but yes. And I've said that it would increase 145% during this pandemic, but it's not because health should be prioritized, but this is caused because of an economic recession that we're living. People will suicide because of unemployment, because they do not have anything to feed their families, or because they don't have the economic measure to live a healthy life. healthy and
The
stable life.
question, but very few time left.
Thank you.
Okay. So that question couldn't be answered. You can ask later, but during your speech, you cannot interrupt any speaker from Los Valles in their interventions. Is this clear? Yes. So now, St. John's negative second speech, 3 minutes, side opposition. St. Los Valles may raise their hand and ask questions if they want to. Whenever the speaker is ready, give us a sign and we will start the timer.
Okay, you can start the timer. So I'm going to start this again with another bit. Vaccines are the most cost-effective healthcare interventions there are. $1 spent on a childhood vaccination not only saves a life, but greatly reduces spending on future healthcare. Ezekiel Emanuel. Vaccines, which come as a product of prioritizing health, make people feel more confident to return to society and the economy. Globally, 1.04 billion vaccines have been given, and in the UK, COVID infections have dropped by almost 65% after people started receiving their first COVID vaccine. Vulnerable people in the UK and around the world were told to shield themselves from the virus, whilst everyone else was returning to a type of normality. However, now that vaccines are common and increasing in popularity, vulnerable people feel more confident returning to society. This is essential in countries with ageing populations like the UK, where as of 2019, 16.2 million people were above the age of 60, because our economy is built around facilities for older people. Vaccines can also be seen as a political device. If your country is at the forefront of developing the vaccine, like England with the Oxford AstraZeneca, the USA with Moderna, and Germany with Pfizer, money will be pumped back into the economy. Every country has scrambled for vaccines and will desperately pay anything that is needed. So surely, by prioritizing health, you can see the benefits it creates for the world's finance as a whole. Whilst on the topic of politics, it is also crucial to mention how political healthcare actually is.
Excuse me, there's a question if you want to answer it now or in a few minutes.
I'm going to answer it now.
Okay, how can we foster healthcare without money to produce vaccines and medical research? Nobody can produce a cure for free.
Well, I think what you've got to look at it as, and it'll be spoken about later as well, is you can't just say that you need money for vaccines, because you do need money for vaccines, you need people to research for it, but it's not like the economy is more important than health, or that health is more important than the economy. It is, they're one and the same. And by people like buying vaccines and supplying vaccines, well, people will get healthier and politicians, as I was going to say, will get more popular. And it seemed that by politicians refusing to help people, they're actually losing ratings because they're ignoring the science to favour the economy, which overall isn't a very good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes the part of the debate with open questions. From now on, we can only hear the speech completely, and we cannot ask questions directly or interrupt that speaker. So now we've got 3 alternating interventions for cross-examination, starting with affirmative side proposition, 1.5 minutes.
Okay, you can start. Okay, I will start my intervention mentioning why economy should prioritize over health because of suicide rates. It is true that suicide rates increased up in 145%, but let's see the causes. The causes are unemployment, problem addressing mental health, and other things, all related to economic. That's why to decrease the suicide rates, we should employ, like, prioritize economy. And you were talking about vaccines. How do a state should buy vaccines without money? Let's see statistics. This is a graph showing how strict were the measures in each country. Here we see that Switzerland was always more strict than Finland. But let's see this other graph about vaccines receive at least one dose for each people. And here we can see clearly that Finland is more upper than Switzerland. So yeah, statistics show that in countries that measures are not taken too strictly to health by prioritizing economy can put the vaccine more quickly and to more amount of people. That's why if the vaccine is the only solution for a pandemic, economy should be prioritized more than health. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the response from negative cross-examination, 1.5 minutes, side opposition. Whenever you're ready.
You just have to ask. You're just going to have to
Can
ask.
I clarify something? Is that allowed?
Yeah.
So do we take this chance to ask a question back to them? Or is it you?
You can ask a question, but during your speech, during that 1.5 minutes, you can leave a question for them to answer in the next intervention, not right now. Did I make myself clear?
I'm sorry, I'm still slightly confused. So
right now, you just have 1.5 minutes for your speech. You cannot be interrupted, nor can you ask a question directly to any of the speakers. In their next intervention, which will be also 1.5 minutes, they can answer to anything that you've said during this intervention, which can be an open question, or it can just be a rebuttal.
Oh, so we just have to respond to what they said and then propose something else?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you've got any more doubts, please ask now. It's okay. I understand the confusion.
You need to respond and talk about vaccines. You need to counteract that and ask them a question.
Okay, you can start timer.
Okay.
So I think, well, the first thing you mentioned was about suicide rates going up. But what's also extremely important to look at is the economy at the moment already isn't spending money on preventing suicide, at least here in the UK. The institutes that are meant to help with this aren't helping. So I think at that point, your point is kind of invalid. Also, when it comes to the vaccines, it's not really, you can't say that the vaccines are all about the money in a way. Like, at what point do you prioritize health? Because you're talking about how money is so important, but the vaccine isn't the only option. There have been, if you look at New Zealand, they were doing incredibly with the pandemic, and they didn't have a vaccine until the rest of the world had one. So you need to prioritize health as your point. That's what they did. They locked down completely. They now have an extremely successful travel bubble with Australia. So I guess it is, at what point do you prioritize health? Because you can't always, in this circumstance, prioritize the economy. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say.
Okay, you have a warning for time, which is not penalized. One warning isn't penalized. The next one will be a 5-point reduction. Now, affirmative cross-examination, side proposition, 1.5 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to answer.
Okay.
You may start the timer. Well, first of all, you had mentioned something about the suicide rates. Well, we examined this, and during statistics, we always see that these types of suicide rates are caused by people not being able to pay their bills, people that get into depression because of how the economy is and how they lack resources and food. And to answer the other question and how it works is the vaccines have come from millions of dollars of research that countries have spent day and night with. But there are countries that still were strict with the confinement. Places like Brazil, where people had been struggling with this, it's very important because they managed to make the confinement, but they still struggled. People that lacked resources, hospitals, and medical workers, services, everything that is related to helping people in case that they have COVID had been lacking in places like this in Brazil. And where the population is so big, they didn't have enough funds to have hospitals enough for people. They didn't have places to put them in. They didn't have workers there to help. They also got infected. This was not only not effective, but it also affected people. There have been cases where people come very ill with COVID and with hospitals, but there's not enough space. The doctors cannot attend them. The ambulance just have to wait outside. They have to wait. There's no way to help people. And this is why it's important to prioritize economy, because if you don't have the economy, there are no funds for hospitals, for workers, and all the materials that you need to be able to keep as great sustenance for people to stay healthy and safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Negative cross-examination, 1.5 minutes, side opposition.
Okay, you can start the timer, please. Thank you. Whilst the economy does fund health services, isn't a government obliged to protect the lives of its citizens in the democratic field? And this is coming from the World Economic Forum. Are you suggesting that instead of preserving a person's life, that you should preserve their job? Because what good is an empty space in the economy? It's also important when you were mentioning suicide rates going up in economic depressions. It's actually been proven that in the Great Depression in the US, suicide rates actually rose more afterwards than during the depression itself. So I think that almost invalidates your point of suicide rates rising because of the struggling economy. And fundamentally, caring about people is caring about their health. You don't care about the money. It's paused.
The time is paused. Oh, okay.
Sorry. And it's also, it's not just physical health, it's social health. And some people feel like they have no value in society. And I feel like Brazil may be a bad example because they were also told by their political leader that it was just a little flu and that they should stop whining. Thank you.
Now, affirmative cross-examination, 1.5 minutes, side proposition.
I will answer.
Okay.
You can start the timer now. Well, you were talking about health measures and how people were suffering from mental illness and they were suffering from depression, and that these measurements were statistics that after the pandemic they were more rising. Therefore, you say that we shouldn't prioritize economics. Why? Because in Panama, 300 doctors have been working in health facilities without even payment. So they have families to take care of, and without money, they can't pay for food, electricity, water, basic services. And what about Ecuador, where more than 1,200 workers of doctors and health facilities also have been protesting for wages and wages? Therefore, we can say that prioritizing economic isn't necessary, since buying economics, since since um since prioritizing the economics, what will help the economy and buy the resources needed for people to have, since with economics you can buy everything. Health measurements could be also bought, and facilities could be more efficient to treat the patients in the health measurements. Therefore, what will you prefer? Die of COVID-19 or of hunger? Thank you.
Very much. Now, affirmative cross-examination, 1.5 minutes, side opposition.
Okay, you can start the timer. Thank you. So firstly, if you're prioritizing the economics for doctors, aren't you also prioritizing health? Because they are the healthcare professionals. Without them, we do have virtually no healthcare system. And also, the economy, even though it's extremely important and no one can deny that, it's not always the right choice. Because if you look at, a good example is if you look at the UK over Christmas, especially England, it was an obvious choice that the economy was prioritized, seeing as Christmas is a great source of income in the government, but almost all countries, whether they're Christian or not. As a result, people were exposed to ill health, which is known to lead to a decrease in capability for individuals and their loved ones. This is liable to make people redundant. By prioritising the economy in the short term, it's leading to long-term unemployment and issues that the economy will need to further face. Upon this, it takes a toll on public prosperity and even proper functions within society, as health is not the primary focus. You can't look at the economy and health on two different fields, but if you look at dismissing health and prioritising the economy, it's only a short-term fix. It doesn't help in the long term, but if you prioritise health and then the economy, everything has a long-term goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we've got final speech, affirmative final speech, side proposition. It's 3 minutes.
Okay, you can start the time now.
Wait a minute, please.
You can start the time now.
Okay.
We are human beings that have been present on Earth for approximately 300,000 years, and we have faced various threats to our existence, like diseases and natural disasters, through all of our history. With this being said, we can be considered as survivors of history. According to Charles Darwin in his Origin of the Species book, we only achieve this survival through natural selection, which is an inevitable outcome of three principles, them being, first, that most characteristics are inherited, which means passed from parent to offspring. Second, that most offspring are produced that are able to survive. And finally, that an offspring with more favorable characteristics will survive and have more offspring with those individuals less favorable traits. Now, in relation to Darwin's first principle, by focusing on the economic side and investing in the COVID vaccine investigations, we can have cases in which mothers vaccinated with the Moderna vaccine can give birth to the babies with antibodies against the SARS-CoV, which already happened in Florida on March 17th of 2021, in which a vaccinated mother gave birth to the first baby with IgG antibodies against SARS-CoV-2. This case clearly shows that if we take the economic path in the future, we may be able to see more children immune to this virus. Now, pointing to the third principle, let me ask you a question. In modern society, what are the favorable characteristics for survival? We may consider that favorable characteristics are a good development, like education, and a good nutrition, which is being affected by the countries that are closing its borders and do not give enough and are not getting enough resources. And for example, this has hindered an access to products that are essential to fighting the pandemic in Latin America and the Caribbean region, such as personal protective equipment and reinsurance for diagnostic kits and mechanical ventilators. Now, we must also take into account that our chances for survival can only be provided with a good healthcare system that can only be provided and by a strong economy. But even though health is also important, it cannot be self-sustaining since it needs a strong foundation like economy to be able to pay for every factor good healthcare requires, like hospitals, medical workers, supplies, and equipment. Let's do the right thing and reasonable thing, which is supporting the economy in order to build a better and brighter future. Also, we should be able to build a better healthcare system that will give us a chance at beating this catastrophic virus that affects all of us, including households' incomes. Thank you.
You said Los Valles has one warning, but it's the last intervention, so you don't have a penalization for that. Okay, finally, negative final speech, 3 minutes, side opposition, St. John's School.
You can start the timer. First of all, I'd like to thank both contributors to today's debate, who quite rightly have come up with some excellent arguments to support their respective propositions. For example, in 1946, the World Health Organization defined health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. This here proves that unless you have a body of people who are both mentally and physically fit, the economy becomes entirely useless. Also, if health is not protected, people will not feel comfortable to return to contributing to the economy, and the economy cannot function without healthy people. However, you said statistics clearly show that mental health cases have majorly increased since the beginning of improving it. In order to achieve this, we must prioritize the economy over health. But our arguments clearly overcame your arguments. Although we have collected these statistics and arguments which favor prioritizing health, during the current pandemic, each country accumulates their statistics differently, therefore making it unfair to equally compare them and extrapolating clear views or ideas on whether one way of dealing with the pandemic is better than the other. However, regardless of how important a good economy and good health are, in order to achieve them, you need them both to be prioritized. The topic we've been given today is a four-step dichotomy. In other words, in order to have one, you have to have the other. To achieve a good economy, you need to have a good society with good health, and in order to have good health, you need to have a strong economy. It's like a seesaw. If you have a bigger weight on one side, the lighter side shoots up. To attain an adequate health and economy, each country's politicians must equally focus on both. The issue has been during the pandemic that many politicians and political parties have dealt with these issues in isolation and not learning from each other's mistakes. For example, in the UK, COVID had appeared in Europe 3 or 4 weeks before entering our shores, and yet we did not learn from these mistakes they made, nor heed their warnings as to what might happen when COVID first became a serious problem. Also, many politicians have become more concerned about their personal ratings and popularity than dealing with the reality they confronted and had been told about by medical experts. As a result, political decisions have often been delayed, badly thought through, resulting in catastrophic death rates and heart within society. Where countries have been particularly successful with the pandemic, leaders have made the right decision at the right time, regardless of their popularity, thinking of the long-term health consequences of both their economy and their individuals within it. The propositions that we've been given today invites us to take one side or another, to believe in binary opposites. But life is much more than mudded. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our debate. Let me congratulate you all for your work. And if you here we got our organization. Yeah.
Hello, how are you?
Hello.
Hi, Patricia, Tula, my name is Sonia. Patricia. How was your
Good
debate?
morning, Sonia. Good
Ah,
morning.
Pablo, hi, good morning. Good afternoon for us.
Yeah, good afternoon for you.
How was everything?
Yeah, it was the first encounter. A first encounter, of course, that's good to see young people discussing about interesting issues.
Yes, it is. Did you have a good time? Yes? Was it your first time? Okay. Yes, as soon as you have your minutes, please send because I have to add all the points, and that's all. So, well, congratulations. Hope to see you soon. Thank you for participating. Thank you for joining this activity, and good luck, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good to see you.